Today's episode of Educators Without Borders is sponsored by Forefront Education, who creates solutions to collect and analyze results from classroom assessments. Visit them at forefront.education to learn more. Somewhere out there, in a classroom or staying up late at home, a teacher is planning that next great lesson that will inspire and change a child's life. Whether they're looking for new, innovative ways to engage and motivate students or connecting learning to real life in a hands-on way, it's always with the end in mind and the context of global citizenship and advancing our humanity. Join us on our search for leading voices in education across the globe as we convene to talk about the topics that matter and inspire all educators in the pursuit of that next great lesson. Welcome to Educators Without Borders, presented by School Rubric.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to Educators Without Borders, hosted by School Rubric, and tonight's sponsor is Forefront Education. I am your host, Traci Browder. We have with us an amazing panel, and tonight's topic is leading with culture, community building, and relationships. So before I tell you anything about myself, I've got to introduce these amazing people in front of me. And first of all, thank you all for being here. So we have with us Mike Gilmour, Krista Lay, and Dr. Diron Ford. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them. Then I'm going to turn it over to them for them to add anything I might have missed. So Dr. Ford comes to us with a wealth of experience. He has been a U.S. history teacher, a coach. He's currently a school administrator. He's an adjunct professor. So he brings a wealth of experience. He also spends a lot of time in conferences focusing on equity, focusing on the male student, just really making sure we reach those, what some people deem difficult to reach populations, and breaking down those stereotypes and myths. He helped his school with accreditation, and that I celebrate you for, Dr. Ford. Moving on to Mike Gilmour. Mike is the author of The Power of Rapport. It is sold in over 20 countries, which is amazing in and of itself. He has over 17 years of experience with a passion for human connections, leadership in the corporate space and the educational space. Really glad to have him here. And his educational experience, I should mention, is, get this, in Asia and Africa. What a wealth of experience he's going to bring to us tonight. Super excited about that. Krista Lay, my dear, dear friend, it's been so nice to connect with all of these people over the past couple of months. Krista is an educational consultant. She's an adjunct professor, and she focuses on diversity, equity, and social emotional learning. She has had experience in some powerhouse companies that led her to form her own social emotional development company. So Krista, we are very happy to have you here. Mike, we're happy to have you, and Dr. Diron Ford. Did I miss anything in the introduction? You guys want to add anything?
No, you did awesome.
Lacey, you did a good job, and you've set us up now. We better live up to it.
Definitely.
Big shoes to fill, right? No, you guys are awesome. And like I said, I am your host. I am an educator in Mansfield, Texas. I have a book that's in the works to be published with Dave Burgess Consulting. And I have a podcast, Intelligogy, the podcast. So tonight is all about leading with culture, community building, and relationships. And that's why we have these great people with us tonight. We're going to dive in deep. We have some amazing questions from across the globe, and we're focusing on the whole child. You know, developing students is so much more than the academics. The academics is only one itty bitty part of it. We can't even get to the academics if we don't take care of what we're going to discuss this evening. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive into our first question. And as we go into the question, we're asking you, our participants who are watching tonight, go ahead and like, follow, and subscribe to School Rubric and Educators Without Borders. Let's check out our first question from Sam Logan. He is a school counselor in Virginia.
Hello, my name is Sam Logan. I'm a school counselor in Norfolk, Virginia. Much research points to evidence that relationships are critical to student learning. What are some specific examples that you have seen in your professional experience?
That's a great question, and I know everybody's itching to dive in. So before we dive in, I want to toss out this piece of information. We want to leave you with some research, some articles to dive into and kind of explore, especially if you're on the tip of the iceberg, just putting your toe into social emotional learning, and you want to understand more about what that means. We're going to start with sharing research from the American Psychological Association, improving students' relationships with teachers to provide essential supports for learning. It's a very robust and detailed research document that will really help you understand all the supports, all the concepts, all the things you need to know behind the scenes. You don't just walk in and start doing SEL. It's not an activity. So with that being said, what do you think, everyone? Let's start with Dr. Ford. Examples of this in your experience, the relationship between social emotional learning and relationships and student learning. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, and I want to frame it. I want to frame my answer around this. First thing, as an administrator and working with teachers, and just looking at effective teacher pedagogy, right? So there's kind of like 5 levels or 5 key things in this order: assessment, instructional delivery, instructional planning, professional knowledge, and then number 1 is what? Relationships. So our relationships with our students, in my experience, is our greatest currency. That's the one thing that as educators, we have to spend time with that. We have to be constantly working and building on that intangible, because that is an intangible. So from my experience, when you look at relationships being the key, and we have definitely seen this during the pandemic, we've seen great examples of this around the country. So you're saying, okay, Dr. Ford, where are you going with this? I'm saying this. We've seen what? Drive-through school celebrations, all designed around what? Relationships. We've seen drive through the neighborhoods, honk your horns, guys, we miss you, holding up signs, relationships. We've seen TikTok videos. We've seen school messages. We've seen just amazing examples of schools being committed to relationships. So even now, parents want that. Yes, they want their students back in school, but the one thing that I hear is, I need my son or daughter around their teacher. It's that relationship. And even as we go back hybrid, I know at Woodside we have posters everywhere. Guys, we miss you. Welcome back. We're playing music in the hallways. We're just so excited because we know that the end game with that is relationships, of course, drive student learning. It drives the learning environment. But those are some of the things that I've seen just in my area and across the country. We see everyone committed to relationships and reconnecting kids and building on that. So that's, I think it's something that intangible, I call it that intangible thing that's so important.
Hey, Dr. Ford, I think that's so critical what you said. I think we're all in agreement that relationships are critical. And I'm sure, for all the teachers out there watching, for the time we've spent in the classroom, you just know when you've got a relationship and a connection established with a child or with a student, you know that child's more engaged in their learning. So we know that we've seen the research, we believe in it. But I really see 2 areas of relationship that directly impact student experience in a school. Firstly, that's the teacher-student relationship, but then also the teacher-teacher relationship, and ensuring that relationship is right, because that is then going to inform our culture. And I think we know, teachers are amazing. We all love teachers. We all are teachers, and we know that we do everything for our students. However, we're human beings as well. And so if we are operating in an environment where the culture isn't right, where we aren't connecting with our colleagues, there's no way we are going to be as effective in the classroom for our students as if we are operating in an environment where the culture is right, where we feel supported and we can take risks and we can innovate and we can be creative. So I think there's 2 avenues to it, to ensuring student success, which is why we're all here. But that's making sure the relationship with the teacher and the student is operating functional and we are intentional about it. But then also and equally important, the relationship between staff, so that we really build that collaborative culture.
I think, Mike, you bring up an excellent point that we have to model what we want our students to grow in their competencies. And we're human too. And so we're still learning and growing in all of these competencies, but we need to think about how we're interacting all of the time because the students are watching us. And I want to say too that I love the name of your book because it talks about rapport. And I often think about the difference between rapport and relationships. And I think the key is trust. And so when you have a rapport, there's a deep trust that's built in there. And that trust, that connection we have with students allows us as educators to make informed decisions on how to support student learning. So I think back to a specific example I was a high school social studies teacher, and there was a student named Kara who was missing class. She was in class once every 2 weeks. And another teacher was like, oh, she's not doing homework. She gets zeros according to the policy. I'm like, well, have you talked with her? Do you know why she's not here? And it was because she was at home watching her younger siblings who were not school age yet. And so teachers who are like, oh, well, the homework shows responsibility. Tara was much more responsible and learned those skills before I ever did. And so for me, she wasn't going to fail my class because she wasn't doing homework. I worked with her on, here are the exams that you need to take to show competency. Let's focus on that part. And so having that rapport, that connection where she felt she could trust and tell me what was happening helps me make better informed decisions on how to better support her. And just Dr. Diron, I wanted to jump in. I was laughing when you talked about celebrations because my older son graduated last year and I was so upset about, oh, we're going to miss the graduation ceremony. What the school did for those kids was a true celebration. And it was so much better than what a ceremony ever was. And so being forced into having these new opportunities that you named are actually, sometimes we find they're actually better than what we thought was good to begin with.
Yes, definitely. We all need that human connection, and it's so important. That intangible.
Absolutely.
I appreciate advertising there, Krista, for my book.
Yes, I love the title.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. You know, for me, it comes down to those daily actions and interactions that we have as staff members, that we have with our students. And in what direction are those actions and interactions focused? So are they building up? Are they supportive? Are they encouraging? And are they all student-centered and student-focused? Or on the flip side, are we gossiping? Are we negative? Are we complaining the whole time? Let's be honest, in schools, there's a million things to complain about, right?
Right.
But so, I just think being intentional about that is so critical. And not only emphasizing the student-teacher relationship, which is vital, but also really building time and intentionality into that teacher or faculty dynamic and faculty relationship. So I love these conversations, though. This is definitely an area of passion, I think, for all of us.
Yes.
And I suppose if we think about educators, right, deep down in all of us, there's a passion to connect with people. So that's why we choose this profession. So it's great to have these conversations.
And, if ever, so many people, there's such a stigma, so many negatives attached to the pandemic. But if there's one strong positive that's come out of the pandemic is what we're talking about. And what Diron led us off with is it has forced us to really be innovative and intentional in how we connect, not only with students, but with each other. And to that end, speaking of connecting with each other, there's something that I want to challenge before we move to the next question, our educational leaders with. We have to be not only the eyes and the ears and the heart in our own classroom. We need to be looking across the grade level. We need to be looking across the campus. We need to be looking at recess, on the football field, on the track field. We need to be looking in the grocery store. We need to be looking next door at the teacher next door. I mean, there have been times where I had to just go in the hall and hug a teacher because she's standing in the hall crying, just consumed with everything going on in the world. So we have to check on each other, but we have to be those eyes and we have to listen with our hearts to make sure that we're seeing people and meeting their needs. We could keep going on this question, but in respect to time, let's go ahead and move to number 2, which comes from Carly Spina. She is a bilingual instructional coach in Illinois.
Developing or even maintaining relationships in our school communities this past year has presented ample challenges. What strategies have you observed, either in your own work or that of other educators, that has successfully supported effective relationship building despite our unique learning environment?
Strategies that focus on building relationships. The first thing I want to say before I hand it over, Krista, you're going to go first with this one, is, when it comes to the academics and the learning, students will be okay. Students are resilient. We are a resilient people. But if we don't nurture, if we don't cultivate, if we don't tend to, if we don't fertilize those relationships, nobody is going to be thinking about the academics. Students won't be able to perform if we're not meeting and exceeding those social and emotional needs. So that being said, Krista, what strategies can you think of and share that support effective relationship building despite the environment we're in?
I have to give you claps for starting off with that kids are going to be fine. I promote connection over content. Connection over content. It has to be something that's foundational, that everybody in the organization is behind. The next part that for me is really important is relationship mapping and connecting with every single student on a regular basis. And so at the beginning of the year, that could be asking students to fill out a Google form about their likes, their dislikes, their passions, their strengths, where they want to grow in, their goals, and then following up on that with the students. As a high school teacher, I had 160 students in a day. Every Wednesday, I would look at my list and say, who have I not had a direct conversation with, one-on-one? All of our students need to be seen. And so I would purposely seek them out for a 2-minute conversation. We just, like Mike said, have to be really intentional about it, and it has to be at the forefront of our minds. We don't want any students to be sitting in our class or online and feel like they don't even know I'm here. I don't matter. You do matter. And we need to be intentional and purposeful about ensuring that every single one of them feels that.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we're going to hashtag that connection over content. I like that. I'm going to steal that if that's okay.
Take it.
Yeah, we speak about intentionality and being intentional. It's so important. I think that is a building block of building rapport, building relationships, and establishing culture. But before that, we have to have an awareness that this matters. Because if we don't have a true awareness that relationships matter and they have a direct influence on our student experience, we can just do things that are add-ons, right? And just do it because we have to do this thing, but don't really do it with authenticity. So being intentional is key. And I always like to think of rapport or relationships like a strainer or a sieve, right? With sand in it, and it's leaking out the whole time. And every day we just got to keep putting in a little bit so we maintain the level of sand in that strainer. It doesn't all leak out. Because when it does leak out, to get it full again takes a lot of effort and a lot of momentum. So every day doing small things, little things, conversations in the hallway, checking in with students, encouraging words, random acts of kindness, whatever it is, as long as it's done with authenticity, those are things that just keep that sort of fire of rapport burning. And so, a lot of the time it's really quite small, simple actions and interactions as opposed to the massive, expensive, activities or engagements. You don't need that. But if it comes from the heart and your intention is just to engage with people and support people, especially during these times, as you spoke about, Traci, that is so well received.
Definitely. Guys, those are some great, some great stuff. I'm sitting here taking notes as I talk. But here's one thing that I gather from your comments, and it's so important as a school leader that you and I have to continue to dream and create things for our teachers. One of my great mentors, Miss Cynthia Watson, always told me, hey, take care of your people. So with that in mind, it's like we have to stay committed to doing that. So even in my space, each morning I send out a daily affirmation to our teachers, just a quick quote, and it's so amazing. People are like, oh, I really needed that today. We've done things such as have pop-up lunches. We just say, hey guys, today we're cooking hot dogs. Come on down to the cafeteria. just things that kind of to just to pour into people. There's so many things. We even have started what we call our Friday lunch brunch. So every day around 12:30, we kind of adjusted the time because we're back hybrid. But we allow teachers just to come on Zoom and we just talk. Hey, how things going? How's your family? Hey, do you have any questions about anything? Any things that we're doing in the school? And it's just so amazing how teachers just need that time just to, hey, I'm human. Even though I'm leading the building, hey, there are things that I'm excited about doing with my family this weekend. And that has been so great just to connect. And again, building that relationship and just really pouring into people, because that teacher-to-teacher relationship is so important. I think that really drives our culture. And kids have to see adults getting along. So, Mike, I wrote that down when you mentioned that earlier. I think that's definitely true. Sure. Definitely.
It's absolutely critical. Now, guys, I have to tell you, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've got quite the audience here tonight, and they have been interacting. I am loving reading their comments. And I have ADD, so trying to stay with their comments in this conversation, I'm doing quite well. But we have Francisco, Marie, Jay, Chris, Vashon, Alicia, and the comments that they're sharing, amazing. Mike, I think it was Vashon or Jay that kind of reiterated what you said. Oh, it was Chris, million authentic acts. But Jay actually tossed out the emotional bank account, and that is so important. And we have to make sure we're depositing in that emotional bank account on a regular basis. It's got to be woven into the fabric, not just an activity or a moment. And, that being said, I made a note earlier that I wanted to share. I'm going to say this phrase, but I'm going to frame it. As educators, we need to have a Me Too mindset, meaning when we're teaching and interacting with our students, if we're going to be authentic, they have fears. A lot of these kids, especially I have a son who's an athlete, recruitment is huge for them. Am I going to get recruited? What about my senior year? All of these different emotions that they're going through. We have to be authentic and share what we're going through too in a teacher safe, appropriate way. And they need to see us work through some emotions. They need to see us have the trials. And Lord knows my tech has failed a million times in the midst of class. They've seen a couple of tears, but they've seen me turn it around. They've seen me push and be resilient. I'm able to use those examples when something is challenging for the kids academically and they kind of give up. I'm like, whoa. Do you remember what happened when I got kicked out of the session? You got kicked out. What did we do? We leaned in. We didn't give up. And as I'm talking, I feel like I sound like a football coach because I'm really way more amped than I am now. And you can see the kids kind of lift themselves up and get ready to just, okay, I got this. I'm in. I'm back. So we have to have that Me Too mindset and connect with kids and let them know that they're not the only ones struggling. But how can we overcome the struggle? How can we keep walking in the storm? You guys want to add anything before we jump to the next question?
I'd like to add something in. I think that what you shared right there is that we need to be vulnerable and share our stories of struggle and how we overcame. Because as my mentor said, Diron, you mentioned a mentor of yours, Tom Stecker. He says that when you tell your story, it gives people permission to open up and to tell theirs too. And I've had a high school student say to me, do we need to learn social emotional learning because we're kids and we don't get it yet? I'm like, no, this is a lifelong process, but because you're focusing on it now, it's going to help you when you're older because you're going to be practicing these skills and developing them way earlier than I did. So you're light years ahead of where I was when I first started learning these pieces on knowing myself and building positive rapport with other people. And so I love what you just said there about sharing who we are and our authenticity, like Mike said, and vulnerability.
Right, definitely. And creating those spaces where that's okay. Where it's okay to say, I'm feeling the same way. Hey, I just don't know what to do. Okay. Creating those spaces where everyone feels comfortable and just sharing. I think that's so important.
I think I totally agree, guys. And I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's exactly that we're human and there's many things we just can't control, right? And that's okay. As long as like you said, Traci, our response to that is to correct it, to get better, to work together, to collaborate, to support, then we're on the right track. But yeah, that authenticity to say, hey, we haven't got it all right. We make mistakes. I mean, I make mistakes every day. But as long as we learn from them and get better and keep our eyes set on the students, on the staff, on the faculty, then we're doing our job.
Absolutely. And Chiquita and Julia just jumped in and just really connecting and engaging in this conversation. I'm loving hearing. I'm loving reading all of these responses. It's been great. Let's go ahead and roll into the third question, which comes to us from Charlie Edgar. He is a third grade teacher in Singapore. Let's check it out.
Hello, my name is Charles Edgar from GEMS World Academy Singapore. My question to the panel is, you all bring significant and diverse experience working with schools on building a positive culture. In your opinion, what do you view are the key elements to define and characterize a positive school culture? Thank you.
All right. Now with that, I'm going to kick us off with a couple of thoughts. For me, it's an investment in the environment. Like, even though a lot of schools, the kids are at home, there are still, in my school, for instance, some kids are learning at home, some kids are in the school. So we have all of these empty classrooms. My classroom, I'm in my classroom, but I'm teaching virtually. I still took the time to set up my classroom. I go up in my loft and I read to the students. I go in my tent, and they feel like they're there. So we have to be very intentional about what's the even walk up? Like, what is it like to walk in the building? Or what am I feeling? What's the vibe I'm getting? Or if I'm just looking on the screen, what am I seeing? So we have to be very intentional, I think, about the environment, that connectedness, family, community. So I'm going to stop there. Mike, start us off with your thoughts on key elements that define positive culture and school community.
It's a great question, and Charlie's one of our rock star teachers here in Singapore. So really, we have to understand that every school has a culture, but that culture is defined by the daily actions and interactions of all stakeholders, staff, parents, students. That really is the litmus test on where the school culture is at. So it's not only that we're building culture. Your school right now has a culture, but and that very quickly can be defined by taking a walk through the corridors and just listening to people and seeing where they're at. So for me, though, when I look at it and what is a characteristic of a positive school culture, and I'm so glad you shared your experience, Traci, because for me, it's staff members going over and above what's expected, not because they're forced to, but because they want to, because they bought in. And for you, just that story you shared with reading, a story over Zoom to your students, you could very easily do it just sitting at your desk, because it has to be done. But you made a choice because you have the focus on the students. You want it to be better. You wanted to exceed that expectation. So that, for me, would say, hey, there's something right about your culture there because you bought in and you're doing more than what's expected. So that's one characteristic I see when I see positive school culture. The second thing I see is a confidence to innovate, a confidence to try things, where there's no fear of failure because you're supported. And unfortunately, there are many school environments where there's a fear culture or a toxic culture, and teachers are bound to very strict regiments of what they can or can't do. And there's no freedom in that. I really believe as leaders of schools, we have to empower educators and then really release them into the classrooms to do what they're good at. So those characteristics really, for me, define positive school culture. Staff going over and above what's expected because they want to, not because they have to. And then a confidence to innovate and a confidence to fail and fail well as well, and then and learn from those. What do you guys think?
Well, Mike, I'm gonna jump in on that. That's great. I'm gonna add this, right? When we think about a positive school culture, one is where students have a voice,
yeah.
Where we're listening to kids and we're respecting students and their thoughts and ideas. So in my space, whether it deals with school activities, curriculum, athletics, whatever the case may be, we listen to the kids. Well, guys, what do you think? We just did a promo video for our kids coming back hybrid. So we're sitting around adults trying to figure out what's going to work. I said, wait a minute, let the kids do the video. Yeah. Let them tell their peers how this is going to look when they come back in. So that's important because as you know, our students have such a wealth of ideas and knowledge that they a place where they feel that they can talk and connect with adults is so important. And the third thing is this: a school environment that celebrates success, where we celebrate the good things. Yeah. I think that's so important. Where kids say, hey, I'm gonna be recognized for something at this school, and I feel good about coming here because everyone is cheering for me in some form or fashion. So those are the two things that I think are important. I'm really big on just student voice and allowing kids an opportunity to talk to me or talk to anyone, and they know they're going to be heard, and things are going to be followed through. Definitely. Sorry, Krista.
No. I agree with you that voice and the empowerment, and so students feel that they can speak up, not that they don't always have to wait to be invited to speak. That they know that they're automatically part of that, and that they're going to have an opportunity, and that their voice is validated. Because I know sometimes people ask for student voice, but then they're not ready to hear, really take in what the students are telling them. So I think that there has to be that balance. And I love, Traci, going back to what you said, is that pre-pandemic, I was in a different building every day, and I would take pictures of everything. It starts with the environment and how you feel walking in, and some of the best healing places I were in had student artwork that was honoring who they were, their diversity, and the great different identity pieces of their identity were reflected throughout. And a place where people just have that extra, kind of like what you were saying, Mike, that they were there to go above and beyond. That it wasn't like, oh, I have to go to school or I have to go to work. So I get to go to work. I get to be here every day. And for me, my classroom was my home. And so when people own the place, the physical environment, the social interactions, like it's their own home.
It's so important. And the space is critical. Like you said, Dr. Ford, that we are student-centered in everything that we do. So if we walk into a classroom and everything looks perfect, the wall displays are perfect and it looks amazing, that's great. But the teacher's done it all, right? Whereas, do we give the students the opportunity to own their space, to put their work up? And hey, with that, it's going to come a little messy, but that's okay, because it's the student's space and they're going to own that. So that's a great point that you made about environment.
Yeah, definitely. So important. And here's the thing, all students have a voice, like all students, I think that's so important.
It's key. And we have to focus on that every student has a voice. And even the quiet student, we have to take some time. If you're virtual, get on the phone, get on Teams or Zoom, outside of class in the asynchronous block, do whatever it takes to build those relationships. If it's sitting at the lunch table with the kids, whatever you have to do, to gain access into their world. We have to do it. A couple of shout outs to the audience again. Jay referenced developing that virtual culture, and that is so key. Couple of thoughts on that too, Jay. And Eunice is here, Julie is here, Anita's here. I have to say something about Anita real quick. She was the caregiver to my 20-year-old son when he was a baby. So it's really awesome to see her. Talk about that virtual environment really quickly. It's so important that we make those students feel that they're not missing anything by being virtual. Last Friday, my kids had an amazing week. They were resilient. We overcame all sorts of challenges and obstacles. So when they came onto the first session, I always play music anyway, but I had Kool and the Gang Celebrate on. And they know that when that song is playing, what's about to go down? And I talked to them all week long about having a talent show and share. So every session was a talent show and share, invited the principal, the assistant principal, the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I promise you couldn't plan this any better, because a couple of the kids, and she said, well, I'm playing music. It's in a different language. It's in my home language. I'm like, baby, play it. Well, another kiddo in the class is like, I know that song. So what am I doing now? building a playlist with songs that they love. See, those eyes and heart, we have to take those. When you push the lesson aside a little bit, you're connecting with kids and giving them experiences that they will forever remember, that their families will. My phone was ringing. I got emails. The office phone was ringing. I know everybody thought I was in trouble just because it touched the parents' hearts so much that you really spent a whole day giving our kids an opportunity to share whatever they love, singing, dancing, video game, whatever it was. That goes a long way. Those kids are going to be ready to do whatever I present to them because I'm connecting with them.
Yeah.
I had a good friend of mine, I'll actually give it. He was my high school Spanish teacher, helped me get my first job, and 22 years into education is still a good friend of mine. And he was showing me that he changes his virtual background multiple times throughout the class. So sometimes it's a scaffold to help the students. He's a Spanish teacher. Sometimes it's a scaffold to help the students be able to speak or to conjugate the words. But sometimes it's just something funny to get them laughing and to get them engaged in what they're learning. And so it's not just, like you said, where you're moving to around your classroom and the students being able and comfortable to share what's happening in their environment. Their talents or their pets, I hear, are a big one too. But also thinking about how we can be creative with our virtual background. And maybe it's quotes or the music that we're playing, all to work and engage our students and honor what they like.
Definitely. And even I know, when we were virtual, we're still virtual, we're hybrid now. I would do walkthroughs and go in and type the kids' notes. Hey, John, good seeing you, man. Everything good? Yeah, Dr. Flood, I'm fine. Okay, great. Even leaving affirmations for the teacher. Hey, great lesson. And even participating. And even we have done virtual spirit weeks. Hey, guys, we're doing our spirit week. Send your pictures in. And we're going to put them on Twitter and Instagram. The kids, hey, we don't use Facebook. Don't put it on Facebook. So they give you some feedback. But, we're still trying to do those things as like we're in the building virtually, to engage our kids and just to check on them. Definitely.
It sounds like this needs to be another show, just that virtual learning environment, because it is so critical and it's not everybody's strength. For some, it comes naturally. For others, it doesn't. And that's our calling, not our job. That's our calling as educators, is to help one another, because ultimately it makes us better people, but it impacts the kids and the family so much. Like, I just witnessed that with my own eyes, and it was amazing. Before we move to question 4, this has kind of come up a couple of times, and I said I wasn't going to add this piece, but I am. On my podcast, something that's been stirring in me when I look at social media and people are talking about social emotional learning, the response always says, well, I do this activity, and it's not an activity. Like, I want to just shake the phone and say, it's not an activity. So it prompted me to do a series on the podcast, Rethinking Social Emotional Learning. And I've kind of started using this phrase, meeting and exceeding the social and emotional needs of all students, teachers, parents, and community. So you notice, like, learning is not in that meeting and exceeding the social emotional needs, because we all have those needs. Mental health it's at the forefront of everything. So we've got to be intentional. We've got to focus on meeting and exceeding those social emotional needs. And then hopefully using that language and or at least thinking that way takes some educators outside of it's a morning activity, it's circle time, it's one and done, good, I can check it off. It's not a check off. Before we move to question 4, any final thoughts on that?
I think
it's definitely not a one size fits all. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. You're good.
No, I would say, okay. I got into what Traci said. You summed it up really well.
Right. I just it's definitely not a one size fits all approach. It's different for everyone. Everyone needs something different. From students, staff, teachers. Everybody's in a different space, and everybody has strengths in certain areas as well. So,
absolutely.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
All good for my.
All right. Okay.
All right. Let's check on Dr. Jay Jones, principal in Virginia. Let's see what his question is for us this evening.
This is Dr. Jones, principal of a school in the state of Virginia. Each of you have unique and powerful experiences supporting school communities through prioritizing relationship building. What would you offer as key practical strategies for school leaders or classroom teachers looking to focus on improvements in these areas? Thank you for your responses.
Okay, friends, those practical strategies for school leaders, classrooms, and teachers. And I'll kick us off by saying, it's a commitment, and it has to be a priority. We have to have this mission mindset. And I believe that it does start with what's the passion of the administrator, and then building that buy-in. We all have to have that. We all have to share that mindset. We all have to share that heart set. We all have to be committed. So for me, that's probably the first strategy, is really building that buy-in. Let's go to Diron. What do you think?
Well, here's strategy number 2. I like that one. Here's strategy number 2. We're going to build on this and look in terms of building relationships. Strategy number 2, engage and recruit external stakeholders that can help you. That's the key. So there's so many different, and here's the thing, take a sheet of paper and just jot down 1, 2, 3. Who are the 3 people in my community that I need to engage with, that I can bring into my space, into the school to help? So even here at Woodside, we have invited one of our local entrepreneurs, Tommy Reeman Jr. I'm going to shout him out. City on my chest. He has a huge store in the mall. He came in and sponsored a writing project or competition. As well, our local councilman, Dr. Marcellus Harris, he was providing community service opportunities for students. We connected with him. As well, our local fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, they sponsored an oratorical contest that was virtual. So thinking about those organizations that are willing to come in and help, and whether they're providing opportunities for kids or supporting school programs, I think that's the number 2 strategy. Who can help you? Outside of the school, because, there are a lot of community groups that want to get involved with our schools.
Yeah, those are number 3. Let's keep it going.
Keep it going. Number 4, number 2, number 3. Yeah.
Down. Those are good strategies. If we look at developing culture, right, and ways, practical strategies to build culture, build relationships in your school. For me, I really believe every single human being is wired for connection. We built for connection. That's why we generally operate way better in collaboration or in community. And so knowing that as a school leader, we don't have to fabricate something or try and get this thing going to get people to connect. We just got to know people will naturally connect. My job is to ensure that the environment that I facilitate is conducive for people to connect with one another. So one practical strategy we did, and I'll tell you a little story real quick. When I started in this school that I'm currently in, it was a new school, a fantastic school. But like any new school, we had to build our culture. We had to build our curriculum. We had to figure out how the buses work. There were a million things we had to try and address. And unfortunately, as a result of these many different things that we had to do, we found that we had a very fragmented staff. Staff would operate within silos. They were incredible teachers doing amazing things, but really they would all be operating individually. And we had to change that. And so we looked, and we know that schools are generally time poor. We didn't have additional time where we can get people together or do other things. But we re-looked at when we do meet with our staff. And we used to have old school meetings where we would stand up in the front and lecture the staff about what's upcoming the next week and important notices and things like that. And we just felt, that information we can share via email and put the responsibility on the teachers to check that information. That's critical. And then that hour once a week, which was our staff meeting, we're going to dedicate that to relationship building, to just creating an environment, put some music on, do a couple of activities that are either related to our school improvement, like curriculum assessments, below the line assessments, strength finders, you name it. But just creating the environment and the time for people to naturally connect with each other. And they did. We didn't have to drive that. We just had to facilitate it. And the one thought that kept on driving our leadership team as we did this was that how could we expect teachers to collaborate on student learning if they don't even know what's happening in the life of the person in the classroom right next to them, right? So first, we got to make sure that teachers, that all of us, we actually really understand each other. We know what we're going through. We can support each other. And out of that comes the amazing pedagogical collaboration, teaching and learning. So for us, it was a real intentional strategy to just create time, and then through a few, direct activities and experiences, we just allowed our staff to connect with each other. I do speak about 6 strategies in my book, by the way. That's the second advert right there about building rapport. So if you want to check that out, you can buy it on any good online bookstore will have it.
Mike, I love how you dropped Dr. Brene Brown in there with We Are Hardwired for Connection.
Absolutely.
So I would recommend to anybody who has not seen her TED Talks or read her book, specifically Dare to Lead, was mind-blowing for me as a leader. And I'd recommend all leaders read it. And I'd like to take it back a little bit to some of the conversation around social emotional learning. And Traci, what you said earlier was it's not yes, that book. Yes, mine too. Look at this. Like, it's all marked up everywhere. And they're all color coded for different parts to remind myself to go back to. It's not a program. It's not a morning meeting. It's not a single activity. It's who you are and what you do every day. And Dr. Diron, going on to what you said, there's not a one size fits all. And I think that's what's scary. A program is a good way to get started, but there are 5 competencies in social emotional learning, and relationships is one of them. And so I really think that we need to get to know ourselves in that the intrapersonal parts of SEL. Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my passions? What are my identities, my individual, cultural, social identities, and how does that influence the way that I view the world and how I interact with people? And then how do I manage all of that, and what are my goals? And like we talked about connecting staff, then it's looking at it from an asset-based point of view. What can I contribute to this school culture that is a strength of mine? And then how can I partner with somebody else to complement the parts that maybe I need to start working on? And I think that's how we create that net for students. And when we are really clear on who we are and our values and our beliefs, I think that it allows us to create more meaningful, deeper, authentic relationships because we have that social awareness. We can connect and take the perspective of other people. And so I really do feel that part of relationship building is a deep dive into who we are and really opening up that piece so that we can better connect and be our full selves with other people.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love that, Krista. And I'm going to go right into a comment that Chris just posted. Organizations are organic. And I'm going to add organizations should be organic, because if they're not, we definitely need to be shifting our thinking to that end. And Krista, what you said, that introspective piece is so vital, because when we know ourselves, when we've gone through that process, when we've gone through awareness and, okay, I need to work on that, then how much better are we to support and model and guide students to do that same thing? Because I believe we're developing the whole child. We're developing human beings. We are not just teaching students. So, Krista, I'm so glad you opened that door. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move to, someone
to add to that, Traci, if you don't mind. And I absolutely agree, Chris, with what you said. It's so important to first understand ourselves and get to know ourselves. And the little phrase I always like to use is awareness leads to regulation. So we can't regulate our behavior and our actions, whether it's our body language, our communication style, our interactions, unless we first had an awareness of how are we carrying ourselves? How am I really communicating? What messages am I portraying, either verbally or non-verbally? So having that awareness, man, that is so critical. I'm so glad you raised it. It's absolutely foundational to before we get to anything practical. It's knowing ourselves.
So key. All right, guys, let's let that transition us into Tammy's question, who is a coach of teachers in Hawaii.
Hi, I'm Tammy Miziowski-Borneman. I'm a teacher, coach, and educational consultant. I currently reside in Hawaii. I have a question for the panel. Given your experience with implementing social emotional learning in schools, What elements of SEL lend themselves to positively impacting the overall school culture?
I'm going to open that question with another piece of research. Now, I'll preface this. We were talking backstage, like we're live, but we were talking backstage before the show started about a piece of this research. So I'm going to hit that too. There's a team of educators who prepared some research, and I think it's going to show on the screen in just a second. That's navigating SEL from the inside out. And ultimately, down deep near the middle to the end of this wonderful research, it talks about 25 effective SEL programs. And one of the conversations we were having, and you've kind of heard us really hit that and talk about it, it's not a box check, it's not a program, it's a combination of so many facets, competencies, domains. It's part of our heart. It's so much. So it's more than a program. But the front part of this research, as you can see on the screen, really helps you understand what is SEL? What is social emotional learning? So if tonight has captivated you and you really want to kind of get a better understanding, that's a good jumping point. That front end of that research really kind of helps you understand the different domains, just a lot of good information there. So now that we've pointed that out, let's talk about what elements of SEL positively impact the school culture. Let's start with Krista.
Awesome. And actually my brain is going because I want to build off of what I had said earlier, and that we need to start with who we are as individuals, and then work towards developing the interpersonal pieces. And then the responsible decision making is, and now what? What are we going to do with that? But I also wanted to bring up that you showed amazing CASEL research there. And I often refer to the navigating SEL from the inside out. And all of those programs, there is not any one of them that focuses on all 5 competencies. And so I think that a program is a great place to start. And there are programs that address some of those competencies really well: the self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. But it's up to us collectively to ensure that all of those pieces are addressed for our students. And so in some of the research that I've done and my company has done, we have found that there are 3 factors that are really essential to creating a sustainable system of social emotional learning. The first is a cultural factor. So it's looking at who is your core team, and is it a diverse representative team? Is SEL relating back to the mission, the vision of your organization? Then there's a structural component as well. Is this a part of your everyday life? Are the teachers given the resources and the professional learning opportunities? Do they get an opportunity to share with one another? Like Mike, you were talking about risk taking, right, in the classroom. And can the teachers are they supported in doing that? And then coming back and talking about what worked, what they want to change. Is social emotional learning infused K-12 in every single content? And I assure you it can happen. We've worked with school districts, and it will, and you don't necessarily need to buy a program to make that happen. Is it included in your hiring practices, in your discipline policies, in your extracurriculars? And then the last part is behavioral structures. And so is that ongoing? Are all of your programs comprehensive? Or are you throwing things out there and like, we're doing SEL? And are you monitoring what you're doing to make sure it is actually happening? And then are you getting the outcomes that you say? Because so often our schools do things, but they're like, oh, well, we've just always done this, but we don't really know if it's helping. And so I feel sometimes like we might be wasting valuable resources, money and human resources and time, not really sure what's working. So CASEL really does have they collaborated with AASA and created, I think it's 10 steps that building leaders can take. Our work actually aligns up with that. I just did a double check a couple months ago. But if we keep thinking about what is the foundation and understand that it takes time to build that school culture, it doesn't happen overnight. We're talking years. But we need to be persistent and intentional about it, and keep building capacity.
Yes.
Traci, Krista, you said that so well. I think just one little thing for me to add on in terms of social awareness. In our context, we're an international school in Singapore with just over 1,000 students and over 70 nationalities that make up our faculty and student body. So being culturally aware is absolutely critical, and having that awareness of different cultures, different festivals, different beliefs, it keeps things exciting, definitely in the classroom where you could have 10 or 12 different nationalities all in one classroom. But for me, just building on what you said, Krista, it's that social awareness and understanding of cultural sensitivity and appreciation as well that really contributes to that positive school culture.
Definitely. And guys, I want to add as well, Krista, I took notes on the structures. I think it's so important where you mentioned the structure and then the PD and then kind of the behavioral structures. I think it's so important when we look at SEL from a leadership standpoint that if someone or something is not aligned to our vision with that, we have to say something and then do something about it. So it's important that everyone understands, like, hey, this is what we believe at the school. And if for some reason they're not understanding, like having empathy for kids, when it comes to grading, that's a big thing now. Hey, we have to have a conversation with that individual and provide them some professional development within that. And then, Mike, as you mentioned, too, kind of being culturally competent with that and understanding how important it is to be culturally responsive to our students, because all of them have different needs, and that SEL piece is so big, and everyone has to understand that. We have to continue to provide professional development and ensure that everyone in the school understands that it's important. And if it's not, then we have to talk and help that person come along. I think that's so important because it's for the benefit of the students and the adults as well. Yeah. Definitely. Yes.
And I appreciate what you said, because it really does need to start from the top down. I've worked in districts where they're like, okay, come work with the teachers, but the central office leaders are not there. Right. And they're not part of that. They really need to be the ones invested and really facilitating and leading this. And Matthew Kay is a teacher in a charter school in Philadelphia, and he wrote this great article for ASCD called Our House, Our Rules. And he talks about how the district needs to say, this is our mission and vision, SEL, diversity, equity. This is what we stand for, and back up the teachers so the teachers know what they can do, what conversations they can have with the students, and how to empower them.
Yes. Krista, this is something that I share a lot too when I'm working with schools, is that very thing. I actually had it in my notes right here, not to forget. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Is, from the administrator perspective, when we talk about that mission mindset, it's honestly, no matter what comes down from central office, we can't pivot and move away from what our purpose is as a school, what you've said is your non-negotiables, the work that you've built and gotten buy-in from your campus. We can't let pressure, expectations, responsibilities from central office change our vision. We can blend it in, but we can't let it take over, consume, and change, because then you've got the next piece of it. The consequence is the trust factor from the staff. So I think you can ask every classroom teacher, the administrator that they love the most, respect the most, remember, always hold dear to their hearts, have powerful, lasting relationships with, is those who took the risk and stepped out of the box and said, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. This is what our house needs. Guys, any final thoughts as we're getting ready to wrap up? This has been amazing. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like, we could go all night on this.
We have monthly chats. The group of us can get together and keep bouncing around ideas.
Absolutely. I was talking to Wallace, kind of brainstorming. I see maybe a clubhouse opportunity down the road for this. I'm just saying.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, friends, I can't believe our time has come to an end. So Mike, Krista, Diron, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. To our guests who have been with us this whole evening, thank you, audience. We really, really appreciate it. You, to the panelists, you bring such a wealth of experience expertise, wisdom, and knowledge. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your passion, your commitment, your ideas, your philosophy. School Rubric and Educators Without Borders thanks you. And so does our sponsor, Forefront. So that being said, friends, we want to remind you, like, subscribe, and follow School Rubric and Educators Without Borders. And speaking of, there's an amazing show coming up on March 27th. It is Breaking Barriers, Equity in School Leadership. So please join us. The panelists, the lineup is amazing. Dr. Vashon Smith, Sharif El-Mekki, Dr. Shantae Garrett, Bridget McNamara. Very, very powerful panel to dive into that conversation. I plan on watching that one for sure. So friends, thank you so much. Everybody have a wonderful evening. We will see you on March 27th. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for watching School Rubric's Educators Without Borders. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we highlight voices and perspectives of educational leaders across the globe. To stay in the know with our latest upcoming panels, interviews, tutorials, and more, make sure that you follow us on social media or visit us at schoolrubric.com. Thank you.